But the idea that you could just practice your way out of something, sometimes true. Many people make complete recovery from injuries, but many people don't. And we now have this little boost, this little tool. I think of it like a screwdriver. If you're trying to fix your car, you don't have a screwdriver. All the knowledge in the world won't do any good. It doesn't do the fixing, but it gives you a new tool in the toolbox. So now physical therapists and occupational therapists can give that extra boost, because physical therapy is fundamentally kind of boring. Move your fingers, move your fingers, move your fingers. It's not really life or death. We're adding this boost so that the neurons don't give up on it. It's going to take thousands of beats, and it needs to feel important. When you're learning to ski, and you're riding, you're going to do something. When you're a baby and you're trying to walk, you're going to hit your face. When you're doing therapy safely, so no one's actually in any danger, but by a tricky system, hacking the vagus nerve, just these small little stretch receptors from the heart and lungs, activating those which people don't typically feel. By activating those cells from now this method goes illustrate, instead of letting that potential strengthening go away, it just keeps building and building and building. And we're now seeing, even years later, after people have been implanted, they're still making continual gains. And that's surprising. It seemed like they had a sentence, no more progress, you're an adult, no more plasticity. But that's inconsistent with what we know. I can learn new things anytime.
Sure.
But why couldn't you get better from stroke? The hole in your head was too great. Evolution didn't prepare you for that kind of injury. Now we're finding we can make progress even with stroke, spinal cord injury, tinnitus, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Amazing, and I have many questions. So I want to first just briefly rewind to the topic of neuromodulators and just clear one thing up for myself. It's really a question. I have to say I'm fascinated and surprised by the fact that whether you stimulate the release of acetylcholine or dopamine or serotonin or norepinephrine, you get the same effect, which is essentially you get more plasticity from fewer effort trials. So you get the kind of learning that the changes in the brain and learning that would occur over the course of many weeks or months, you can condense down to days, even one day. And I must say, and I'm not saying this just because you're sitting across from me, I have 10 favorite papers in all of science, and your science paper, Stimulating Nucleus Basalis while exposing animals to a 8 kilohertz tone, I believe it was, and showing this massive rewiring of the adult auditory cortex to overrepresent that tone. When I saw those images, I can still see them in my mind. It's blue and purple, and like I know exactly what they look like, and it's just like, wow, that was, it went against everything we had learned in our neuroscience textbooks. This wasn't supposed to be possible, right? Critical periods are over. These are adult animals, shouldn't happen. And then when I learned about the Reckenzone and Merzenich work that they were talking about, of whatever the subjects are attending to, either touch or hearing, that's where the plasticity occurred. And just to this day, it blows my mind. I assumed it was all governed by acetylcholine. And I have a bunch of pet theories in my mind now about why nature as a tinkerer might have come up with different circuits that could do that, but we'll save that for over a coffee offline discussion, because it would just be a wandering discussion. However, there's this parallel universe to the one that you exist in with neurostimulation, which is that many people are interested in taking drugs, prescription or otherwise, that they can use to open the door to and enhance neuroplasticity. And I've been positively struck by the data on psychedelics. Traditionally, the psychedelics are LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, and psilocybin, both of which augment serotonin, act through specific receptors. And the data there from the clinical trials speak to pretty impressive results in some trials in relieving major depression. MDMA, methylene dioxymethamphetamine, we have to remind people these are illegal drugs, Schedule I drugs, at least at the currently. Pretty impressive results for treatment of PTSD, provided in all these cases that you have proper therapeutic support going into these sessions, during and afterwards. We're not talking about people just taking these recreationally.
Yeah.
When I saw those data, I just kind of went, okay, well, it's neuromodulators opening the window to plasticity. When I think about neurostimulation now, the way you're describing it, I think, okay, it's an electrode or a microelectrode or whatever it is, stimulating plasticity. And when I think of somebody working as hard as they possibly can without it ingesting any psychedelics or any neurostimulator in the therapist's office week after week, or these people who have a stroke or a spinal cord injury just doing their physical therapy, just working as hard as they can to try and recover any kind of movement. I think of the same thing. They're just neuroplasticity. They're trying to get that little squirt of acetylcholine out in their brain. And then, of course, there's this other parallel universe of people who augment acetylcholine through now oral nicotine, right? Stimulate the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, and on and on. And so it seems to me that the requirements, this is an AND gate type arrangement. You need neuromodulator present. You need a particular pattern of firing in the neurons so that there's a chance that they wire together or wire apart, whatever you're trying to drive the circuit to do. And you need a strong intention. You need that friction focus from the person. So on the one hand, it seems like we need specificity, and that's where we're going to go next, talking about the vagal stimulators that you work on and are getting such incredible results with. But on the other side of the coin, it's like you just need these chemicals present. So, for instance, if I want to learn something, and I'm going to focus as hard as I can on it, I will occasionally take, these are very low doses, 2 milligrams of nicotine. I don't do this lately. I just did an experiment last year where I didn't like it because it made my throat spasm a little bit when I wasn't taking the gum. The muscarinic receptor business explains that. So I stopped. But yeah, it provides a stimulant effect. But here's my question. If we just globally raise acetylcholine by taking a drug, do you get the opposite effect as you get from globally taking decreasing acetylcholine activity by taking a drug, which you said makes you forget? If you just globally raise acetylcholine by taking, I don't know, what's a good example of a drug that will do that for an Alzheimer's patient or for...
all of the drugs of abuse will increase,
nicotine.
all of the drugs of abuse will increase acetylcholine as well as increasing dopamine.
Yeah,
So there's
or dopamine, apomorphine.
Yep.
Apomorphine, people take apomorphine for various reasons. It improves working memory. We know this, at least in the short term, for people that have modest to low dopamine going in. If you already have high dopamine, probably not going to do much. But it sounds like you just need to boost a neuromodulator or some small cocktail of these 4 neuromodulators. And the opportunity for plasticity does indeed expand, regardless of the entry point that you take. Is that your view as well? Because you're working in an area where, and by the way, I brought along one of these stimulators to this recording. Michael was kind enough to give me one. I don't know, did you give this to me or are you taking it back to Texas with you? Okay. This thing is smaller. This is a little chip that is smaller than my pinky nail. I'll hold it up for the camera. We can provide a link to an image of it in the show note captions for those of you listening. It's tiny, tiny. Yeah. This would be inserted about 3 centimeters deep in an outpatient thing, in and out of the clinic. Probably less painful than a dental cleaning, especially if you like going to the dentist as little as I do. This thing is all about specificity. It's all about not having to take a drug.
Yeah.
Where's the trade-off? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks of going with a microstimulator versus, I don't know, I'm not saying people should run out and take psilocybin or apomorphine, but
why not?
By the logic that you just need an increase in a neuromodulator, it works.
My background was in biochemistry. My degree from Berkeley is in biochemistry. I just thought, let's get the biochemistry right and people will get better. And then I had to learn about the brain. And the brain says it's the timing. The psychologists have told us from the very beginning, timing, just back to Pavlov. You can ring the bell, you can feed the dog, but they have to happen at the same time. And if you just reward everything, that's similar to rewarding nothing.
Yes.
So the real issue, and I actually spent more than 5 years of my life trying to do this without a device. So I had success using the deep brain stimulator. I said, I don't want to put deep brain stimulators. I can't imagine putting hundreds of thousands of people with deep brain stimulators. It seemed like too much to be true. Many neurosurgeons say it's not, it's safe, no problem. But I just thought there's got to be an easier way. And so I did exactly what you said. I said, what are the ways to increase acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and serotonin? Microdialysis made it clear which things do it. Amphetamine, of course, nicotine, all these things. It's very easy. Cocaine, all these things do it. And I did experiment after experiment after experiment after experiment. I still feel bad for the graduate students who did all of those experiments.
Adderall?
Did Adderall, did all of them, paired with a tone. And it just didn't change anything. And that's because the tone only comes on once in a while. And there's just ongoing activity. Neurons are firing, you record neurons, they're firing all the time. Only one action potential is the tone action potential. The neurons firing at 4 or 5 hertz, sometimes 20 hertz, just pop it along all the time, and then you get one more spike when you record these neurons. When a drifting gradient goes by or a scene or what, it's not much more.
Spike is action potential, electrical firing of neurons. We should just clear that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so how does the brain know which thing? There's 150 trillion connections. Which one am I asking for more of? You gotta tell me which. Everything. Make more of everything. That doesn't help the network work very well. So my understanding of the world that I live in is sort of a post Aristotle, four humors idea that it's not that there's too little or too much of these things, it's the timing that matters. And when I watch a really good coach, they're really into that. They're going, that was it. That thing right there. That's what I want you to pay attention to. And back to the reflection thing, let's think back. That was the part where you were at ease there, or whatever it was. There were these moments of learning. And of course, there's an hour of heavy working out, whatever it is, on Spanish verbs or on rock climbing. But there's these moments where you're figuring out that was the connection. We sometimes call them aha moments.
Yeah.
And we think maybe the neuromodulators are being released at that aha moment. They are. We can tell you a lot of experiments have been done. When you're having oh my God, something just happened, those neurons are having exposure to those neurotransmitters. So then the question is, why doesn't it work that the brain rewires for that particular tone? It kind of does. It's not that it doesn't work at all. And as you said, some conditions are so bad that you can do very non-selective things. And the classic example would be if you have major depressive disorder and you do electroconvulsive therapy. We're not pushing your brain toward any particular goal. We're triggering a seizure in the brain. It's going to change the brain, but we're not telling it which way to go. And somehow people tend to recover from that in a better state than they went into it, because it was so bad to begin with.
What are the statistics on electroconvulsive therapy? I mean, some of us are familiar with the end of, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where Jack Nicholson's getting, he's bite barred into the process and coming out like a vegetable. But that's not what happens, right? Most people emerge from it pretty intact, and you're saying much better in terms of their overall mood. What percentage go into remission? What percentage feel significantly better?
So we don't know the answer to that because the randomized controlled trials were not done at that time. My colleagues who are psychiatrists say it's the most effective thing we have for people who are treatment resistant to all the other treatments. So I don't have an answer for you. Normally we do a sham control, and these people are anesthetized when it happens, so they would never know which one happened. The study's easy to do. It's just you can't do it in rats because rats don't have depression. And right now, no one is signing up. If you have a sign up for actual therapy or a 50% chance of getting a therapy, people tend not to sign up. So the answer is not no. If we did, we'd get a responder rate in both groups. We'd say, let's say it's 60% or 50% response rate, where they're better. And we get a sham response rate. Let's say it's 25% get better even when you don't do it. You'd subtract those two, which is 25%, take the inverse of that, and you get a number needed to treat of 4. That's how we now work on these medications. We think about what's the difference in the percent that you're going to get better with a double-blind placebo control. That data is not available. But the general idea is the symptoms are clear. People, the day before that happens, all those memories are gone. You'll have no memories whatsoever. So people do this 20 times, as they typically do. They'll lose 20 days of their life, which they never get back.
20 times? They have to go through the ECT?
Many people will do it on a regular basis.
Electric shock therapy, the EST, 20 times?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I thought they just go in at once.
Typically sessions of 3 is my understanding. Again, I'm not a practicing psychiatrist, so take this talk with your own physician. Typically, do a sequence of them. People, as you know, in major depression have sort of a cycling pattern, as most neurological disorders and psychiatric disorders do. So they'll go in during a time and do nothing. They'll take care of it because they're a person. But the evidence, experience from colleagues and trust is this is really not true. We're trying everything else. And I don't know that the study for a long time. We don't have the answer what the exact probabilities are, unlike the other studies we've done lots of randomized controlled trials with cognitive behavioral therapy. But the idea is you get a benefit, but it's just suggestive. This is still a pretty crude technology, and practitioners of it, they're more than happy to acknowledge that. They want the seizure to not be too bad, because it's too bad, so they have ways to start the seizure and then stop the seizure. They've optimized it, so it's more effective now than it was in the Jack Nicholson days. It's not painful anymore, because people are anesthetized when it happened. You don't need to be awake, you don't need to experience it. That wasn't an active ingredient. What was an active ingredient is the seizure, which is a storm of brains, sometimes called a brain attack, where neurons are firing synchronously all over the brain and releasing massive amounts of neurotransmitters at the same time. That's generally something you don't want. If you had a choice to have a seizure or not to have a seizure, you would choose not to have a seizure.
Okay.
If you have a child, you'd rather not have a seizure. But if someone is really stuck in a severe state and they're at risk of harm themselves, it's been determined by the powers that be that it's better to try this. And many people voluntarily do it, lose a few days, get better for months, and then come back and cycle and do it again. So that idea is not a ringing endorsement. The fact you have to do it again, it's not a cure. It wasn't pushing toward any particular thing. I've got a number of things in my house that work kind of well. If you give them a good whack across the top of it, it'll start up. A motor that kind of sticks. You give it a kind of whack, but I'm not really fixing it. I need to grease some bearing or something, but whacking it will also work. So I think if this is, again, date me, the Gilligan's Island thing, a coconut would fall on your head and you suddenly be better. That's the level of sophistication. But the proof of concept is, it's the plasticity that's making them better. Mm-hmm. We used to think that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors worked by increasing serotonin, and therefore we concluded people's serotonin was low with depression, and yet, behold, they don't have low depression.
Right. It's a plasticity tool. This is so important for people to hear, because I think SSRIs have been demonized, and they do indeed have side effects. They've also helped a lot of people with OCD, right. But they are a tool to induce plasticity. And then it becomes a question
well,
of
we never talk about the things that go
to
well.
Promote plasticity in a particular direction. I actually think it's an unresolved question as to whether or not things like psilocybin and other psychedelics, MDMA is not really a psychedelic, it's an empathogen, but whether or not the experience that one has during the so-called journey or trip is actually the source of the change, or whether it's the augmentation in serotonin and then the things that happen afterwards. My guess is it's probably both. Because those sessions tend to be very emotionally laden, and so there's a lot of talk therapy work that can be done with a qualified therapist that carries immense emotional load, and it definitely includes the components of focus and friction. So, in any case.
And reprocessing later, we're talking about the reflection. I think many people, after one of these experiences, they're now thinking about it in a way they weren't. They're putting it away and we're not talking about that. So for PTSD in particular, avoidance is a defining hallmark. It's a criteria you have to have in the manual that defines what this is. So avoiding it is a problem, and now you've freed people from that. The work, though, being done, the rewiring, is probably really work they're doing. It's now they're re-entering that environment. They're re-engaging that relationship. They're not avoiding it, in part because they believe that they can do it and that it isn't harmful. That's true. It isn't harmful. These are pathological avoidances that people are doing. And the question is, can we come up with something better? What are the active ingredients? The experiment's not yet been done, is to appropriately blind people. So there are many drugs that make people have a trip. It's possible to enroll people who've never had a psychedelic before, and then they will know. You can give them a lot of caffeine. They might think, I guess that's what, peyote's like. They wouldn't know. But that's not yet been done. I think it can be done. Usually when people say experiments can't be done properly, I get nervous. We're just too smart for that. We made it to the moon and back. We can do an experiment. So finding out, we'll know the answer. On stroke, which we talked about before, enhancing plasticity, you mentioned Prozac. Fluoxetine is the name of the agent. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor increases serotonin and has effects on brain-derived neurotrophic factor and all the rest. It looked really promising in animals. Many, many published studies did the same thing we did, which is why we didn't think our thing was going to work. We took the therapy, which we know is helpful, practice using your paw that's injured, and then add the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and the animals made progress. And we did it again and again. We did it in monkeys, we did it in cats, we did it in rats, and then we did it in people. And lo and behold, the people got better. And then we did a large-scale randomized trial, and they didn't do anything. So it was 1,500 people with stroke. We gave them Prozac. And you will not be surprised that the new onset of depression was slightly lower in the group who had active antidepressant. That makes sense. You may or may not be surprised that the group who got the Prozac also had more hip fractures, because of course serotonin is critically involved in laying down bone. And so this is really bad if you're an old person with a hip fracture. So taking Prozac has off-target effects.
I didn't know that it diminishes bone strength.
That's crazy. I had
really
no idea.
Chondrocytes are the cells in the body that make bone. And when you mess with serotonin, you mess with those. This is a newly discovered thing for me I didn't know about, is that Ritalin has effects on growth, right? So most people now are aware if you take Ritalin, you'll end up being about an inch shorter. This is just an alternative effect.
Crazy.
Many positive benefits, but there are some negative, and you have to weigh the pros and cons. So in this case, we saw all the things we knew that Prozac did, meaning they took the drug. But their functional ability, their ability to move their hand, wasn't any different. And why is that? It's because the range of problems people have is so diverse. People have all kinds of other insults. The rats are all perfectly situated in the cage. They got exactly the lesion and all the rest. Why did the first few trials work? Because they were small randomized trials with some, confirmation bias or some other things implicit to them. The Food and Drug Administration is serious. Will this really work when no one knows? None of the investigators get to see the data. No one gets to look at anything. When you run a phase 3 pivotal trial, it's no joke. And we usually fail. And that's sad for us because we want it to work. But it's the truth, and we just accept it. Sometimes we go back through and say, maybe it worked for a subset. And we're still doing that. Maybe some people did get a benefit. But if that's true, that means some subset might have gotten worse. Good, let's select these people. So I think there's a lot of failed trials we can go back to and try to figure out, maybe we didn't pick the right people. Drug companies hope that the market is as large as possible. But what we find in our animal studies is there's a narrow range. You've done some beautiful experiments looking at how to get retinal ganglion cells to regrow. And the conditions need to be just right. Not too much crush, not too little crush. You got to get it just right. I think there are a lot of things we've found really do work. It's just we hope they worked as a panacea. And they don't. They might work for 10%. The only other therapy for stroke is called constraint-induced motor training, CIMT. And the idea is you just put a glove over the good hand and you force someone to use their bad hand.
Yeah, this is Timothy Shallard's work from years ago.
Yeah.
I love that work because it fits nicely with what we know about recovery from visual deprivation.
Exactly.
If you're
Yes.
eye, you lose vision in the pathways that eye governs. Once the eye is healthy again, you can open it up, but you have to close the other eye. You can't recovery from any kind of injury. You have to be careful you don't over rely on the healthy limb. So this is also true in the context of stroke.
Yeah, I love the human weasel experiment. I think things in neuroscience are only useful if they're counterintuitive. If they're obvious, why do we need neuroscience? And the idea that a kid gets a big scrape over his eye, and he's 3 years old, and he's got a patch on his eye for 3 weeks. And after the patch comes off and the eye is fine, you need to tell his mom, hey mom, what I want you to do is put a patch on the other eye. She will doubtless say, but that's not the eye that was hurt. And you'll say, I know, but I have to reverse patch to rebalance the eyes. That's counterintuitive. These guys did experiments,
Is it
cats and
though?
monkeys, figured out what it was, and they now saved untold number of people's vision, at least in one of their eyes. But it was counterintuitive to do that. Now we don't reverse patch anymore. We give some drops. The eye drops make it a little bit blurry. You don't have to block the eye entirely. You can just do a drop that slightly blurs the eye by opening the pupil up.
Does
And now
not sound counterintuitive.
the eye that was sort of behind catches up. That is super practical, super cost effective. Atropine costs pennies. It's super safe. It's just an eye drop. I just full disclosure, I had my own amblyopia experience as a kid. And when I was a very young person, I sat and tried popsicle sticks. And I had lazy eye strabismus, and then that ended up causing me double vision and trouble reading when I was a very young child. So
Your eyes are well aligned now.
my eyes are now
I'm
aligned.
sitting across from you, so I know. And
It was many, from ophthalmology department's point of view. This is a little bit telling too much about me, but mostly about my mother. It was originally believed that only adults would go through this much therapy. There's actually a paper written, I'm told, on me as someone who would go through this therapy and completely resolve the symptoms. It just takes a lot of time. Following popsicle sticks, I had little lenses at, I don't know, I guess I was 6 years old, put little lenses in it would make it harder. It was like eye building for the eye. The doctor told me, you don't have to do all this. We can just take your eye out and we'll stretch one muscle and we'll strengthen another one and we'll pop it back in. And I was 6, I went, I don't think so.
Yeah, that sounds pretty scary.
I'll do this one.
How's your binocular vision now?
Totally fine. Totally fine.
You were able to play
Still
sports
within the
requiring
criteria.
depth perception.
Still within the critical period early enough because of those experiments. Those handful of animals made the ultimate sacrifice so that we now know how to treat things. So now getting back to these counterintuitive ideas, how are you going to intervene when you've got a kid with Down syndrome or someone with Alzheimer's and they're slipping into dementia? What are you supposed to do? We don't know. Is psilocybin is the answer? Let's use it. It's certainly counterintuitive. But it may or may not be. We got to run the experiments and find out. So for fluoxetine, it'll
Again,
really
it
promise.
does not
There's a
sound
big initiative on stem
counterintuitive.
cells. Stem cells looked incredibly promising.
For stroke.
For stroke.
Yeah.
That's right. That's a 1,300 person set of that analysis. It just didn't help or hurt. It just didn't do anything. And we want it to work. I want it to work. I'm a molecular biologist. I want the cells to go in there and do the good stuff, release the good juices. But it's a practical matter. That's what I love about working with patients is they're just very practical. They don't have a dog in the race. This, that, the other thing. What is the pro and con? And we're now getting to the point where we can, partly because of your work, have people really understand how they work. Don't take an antidepressant because it's an antidepressant. That's just what we called it. It doesn't mean that that's what it evolved for. That's not what that's a label. You could say anti-PTSD. It said this must be anti-PTSD because it's called anti-PTSD. We have to be careful about these labels. Antidepressants typically are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but some selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. Some are both. Some have kind of complex off-target effects, but they're all lumped because of what they do. And as you said, whether it's in pathogens or psychedelics, these are given names because of the things we see. The things we see are real. People see them, and this is the effect that they have on mood, on whatever. They all happen. The question is a practical one. What will the long-term outcome be? And we often don't know that. For many, many years, we think things that are very valuable initially turn out not to be so valuable. I always think of the Pope with a flask of God knows what, but I think it was cocaine or Sigmund Freud or whatever else. Taking these substances, just fully convinced, I found the right thing.
Wait, the Pope took cocaine?
Is my understanding, again, this is one of the things I learned in Catholic school, but yeah, there were many people who thought many of these elixirs were really, really powerful agents that were going to be useful. And later,
But they are
just said, it's not
powerful.
working for me. Most people learn, yeah, you can drink your way out of a bad relationship, but it's not really going to solve the problem. I got to do other real work. So there's a lot of short-term solutions is my point. And the question now is, how's it going to work long term? We're getting to the crisis where someone, suicide, we're getting to the point. Whatever things. Now we're in the intermediate phase. But a year later, how are we doing? It remains to be seen. We're not yet years post trying these agents. We're only now trying them because they're listed as Schedule 1. They cannot possibly be used because we tried them in the 50s.
You mean the psychedelics? Yeah, I mean, I'm encouraged by the results of the trials with psychedelics and adaptogens like psilocybin and DMA in particular. I'm not just being politically correct here. I think people need to be very aware that the therapeutic support going in, the therapeutic support during, and the therapeutic support afterwards, especially for this reflection piece, what's typically called integration in the psychedelic journey space, is vital. And there are a few or more examples of very high functioning people who have crashed their mind in their life with psychedelics, using them. I don't know how they were using them, but in an unguarded way. I think they hold great promise because of their ability to augment neuromodulators.
They are
The
holding.
question about what happens in the journey is a separate matter, and I'm not qualified to answer that anyway, but I just find it amazing that these four chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine, alone or in combination, are not the only path to plasticity, but they are necessary. They're not sufficient, but they're necessary. And, if a small little, pinky nail size stimulator, I realize I'm holding up something that looks a little bit larger, like the size of a what reminds me of that like lip balm stuff that you put on when you go skiing, like that Carmex stuff. It's about that big, but the chip itself is the size of my pinky nail. And if that can be implanted, and it can stimulate my vagus nerve in a way that the brain thinks I'm having a heart attack, we might scare people with that discussion. But as you pointed out, you're not aware of that, right? Basically, it's taking advantage of a pathway that signals something's going on in the body, but you're not inducing a heart attack, obviously. And you're getting a burst of neuromodulator release. And then there's a window that opens where you can learn stuff better, whether or not it's new movement, new knowledge. I want to be a subject in an experiment where obviously I don't have a stroke. Well, maybe it's not obvious I don't have a stroke, but I don't want a stroke, but I would love to be in an experiment where you're using this for more rapid learning. Do you have any intention of doing those kinds of studies?
We have done a bunch of those experiments. Much of this work is funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and they're looking for ways to enhance learning. It was called the TNT program. I like it to sound exciting. It was targeted neuroplasticity training. And so under some circumstances you can improve learning, but under the majority of conditions, you're already so smart. The rats we studied are already so smart, they just didn't help or hurt.
Doesn't help you focus more?
Didn't help focus more, didn't make it worse, didn't
That's
make it better.
weird.
Now, you can always wonder, maybe we didn't do the conditions right. We did hundreds and hundreds of experiments.
Yeah.
So it's possible, though I don't know this, for sure, it's possible this is one of the few technologies that helps those who are least capable among us and does not help those who are most capable. And the idea is, the way we're activating this is still pretty crude. Like, I'm blasting this whole thing. This used to be called the reticular activating system, this arousal network that releases all these neurotransmitters. It was viewed as one system back in the day. We later found molecular biology and divided it into these different neurotransmitters, but they all kind of get activated a lot. They're highly covariant when they fire in relation to these arousing signals.
Yeah.
But the way we're doing it is still pretty crude, right? I'm not activating individual fibers. I'm activating the whole kit and caboodle.
Where does it get inserted?
The left vagus nerve on the cervical branch, just right here. Find a little crease in your skin, open that up, put it in, close it up. If you feel your jugular, your carotid artery, it's running right there.
How long from when I walk into the clinic to when I walk out with the stimulator? And again, no wires, right? It's wireless. How long is that procedure?
You're anesthetized for 35 minutes, so from open to close, that part of it is half an hour. Typically, people,
So
you
shorter than a haircut.
Yeah, it's the actual part where you're
I have short hair, but yeah, shorter than a haircut.
Right.
Okay.
But the actual showing up and getting checked in and checked out, it does take 2 hours or whatever it is. I don't actually know. That's a good question.
But you do it once.
You do it once and you're done. And when it's off, it's off. Like the medications are maybe lingering in your body, having effects. You're talking about specificity, which I want to go back to. The specificity, it doesn't activate any other nerves than the one that's on. It's a tiny bit of current.
And how do I activate it?
So we put a band around your neck, looks like Bose headphones or Beats headphones around it. That has got a coil. There's a coil in that device. The two coils are aligned, just like your phone. You put your phone on, you don't plug it in. The coil's aligned. That now turns it on because the device has no battery. The next generation, the experimental device, the device that's FDA approved does have a battery, and that's how it's powered. Our new device is much smaller because we're giving it the power, and we're also signaling now. And the way we do that is we measure the forces someone's making with their fingers or their hand. We'll make a handle. We'll measure the forces. Every person's different. You got to meet them where they are. Every educator knows this. Where is this kid? Let's get them in their best zone. So if we're taking a person, this is all they can turn. It's all the rotation they've got of their wrist. 5 degrees. That's fine. I can easily measure 5 degrees. You can do 90 degrees, 100 degrees, right? But they can only do 5. When they're doing 5, sometimes they do 6. Just for whatever reason. I don't know why. That's when I have the stimulator.
Who is the stimulator?
The computer does it itself. It's closed loop, just like your air conditioning unit. When the temperature goes up, you don't have to turn it on.
So they can be at home doing this. They don't need to be walking around with a researcher following them.
That's right. The nature paper was done in a clinic, supervised, but really the therapy is being delivered by the computer, measuring their performance, tracking each individual person, looking back for the last few minutes of their activities, seeing what they can produce, and looking to see what's in their top 10%.
What about tinnitus? By the way, is that the way it's pronounced, or is it tinnitus?
Most people say tinnitus,
Okay.
emphasizing the itis, the inflammatory part of it. There's actually nothing inflamed.
Okay.
I like tinnitus. But
Tinnitus.
It's most often called
Okay.
tinnitus.
I get so many questions about tinnitus.
Yeah.
Clearly, people suffer from it when they have it. And
Yeah.
I've seen a few papers out there that maybe low-dose melatonin before sleep can help a little bit with certain forms of tinnitus. Maybe it's just the consequence
We
of
don't
from
get
sleep
used
and
to
this kind
it.
of thing. In anticipation of today's discussion, I put out the call for questions about brain stimulation, and tons of questions about tinnitus. When you treat tinnitus using this little stimulator, how successful is it? And also, how common is tinnitus, and how do you do those
So
experiments?
this
how
pelvis
common is it?
bone is the lightest
Because it
light
seems
in
very
this
common based
figure.
on the number of questions. How successful is your treatment, and then what does the experimental manipulation look like?
Yeah. So how common is it? Very common. I mean, hearing loss is common. It's, of course, highly correlated with growing old, which is a good thing.
Wait, are those the same thing?
No, they're not the same thing. A lot of things accumulate to cause damage to the hair cells in your ear. Taking on antibiotics, having a viral infection, traumatic insults, all those things. But the number one is just growing old. So if you grow old enough, things start falling apart. And one of the things that falls apart are these hair cells. These are incredibly precise. The vibration these things are doing are the width of one atom. Like that's how tiny, the smallest vibration you could detect. The hair cells only moving back and forth by an atom. I mean, it's incredibly precise. And so they get damaged. They're just super sensitive.
Yeah.
When they get damaged, it's typically the high frequencies that get damaged. Whether you're going to rock concerts or shooting a gun or playing your horn loud, it's the high frequencies where the things vibrate the fastest that get most injured. And people start noticing they can't hear as well in a crowded restaurant or whatever else. You go and get an audiogram with an audiologist and they'll tell you, yes, above 8 kilohertz or above 4 kilohertz, you now need 20 times more sound pressure to hear it. Okay, you can still hear, just not as good. The thing is, the brain is plastic, as we've been saying, is such a good thing. But the brain being plastic means if nobody high frequency ever happens, and low frequency things keep happening, your brain is going to shift from the high frequencies to the mid frequencies. And you're now going to end up with too many neurons in the mid frequency. Right at the edge of where you can hear, you get too many neurons. The same thing happens after an amputation. So you end up with too many neurons responding to the stump because the hand's not there anymore. So if the hand's not there anymore, I'm not going to keep doing that. The neurons find something else to do. Just like smart little neurons that they are. The problem is if you exceed some threshold, if I take this microphone and put it next to a speaker, you'll get feedback. Because the number one input to neurons in the cortex are other neurons in the cortex, not the outside world. Neurons in the brain mostly talk to themselves, not the world. There's very few neurons in the eye. You know this, but most people are surprised. You don't have megapixels of resolution. You got a kind of a smallish number, but you're moving around and you're using it sampling. Here we have a situation where the way the brain is processing is over-focused. You start to get oscillations. The neurons start to fire together, they start to wire together, then you start to pay attention to it. Most of us have heard it. My advice for everyone is try to ignore it. Because when you're paying attention to it, you're listening to it, you're fretting about it, you're worrying about it.
The tinnitus.
You're releasing neurotransmitters, yes.
I see. So people self-amplify their own tinnitus by paying attention to it.
That's
Of
right.
course.
And the more anxious they are about it, because they think, I'm dying, I need to go to the doctor, which is smart. You should look out for new symptoms. Totally true.
They think they're dying?
They think they've got a brain tumor. And people are relieved after 4 months of worrying about it to realize you get a brain scan, you don't have a brain tumor. Some people do, but that's pretty rare. The vast
4
majority
months?
don't.
What's up with
But
that?
that worrying is the food to this particular cancer.
Oh, wow.
That worrying, in the same way that avoiding going back to the site of an assault is the thing that produces PTSD. Avoiding peanuts can create a severe allergy, a dangerous allergy to peanuts. We need the exposure, we need the diversity, we need that context. That information is useful to us. When we shield ourselves, as we did from peanuts, many people got peanut allergies. Now that we've gone back to exposing children, you don't have that problem nearly as bad. I work with Boy Scouts, and so we have a big giant peanut allergy warning thing. Don't let someone.
Oh yeah, every time you board a plane now, they say, we got one person on here that's peanut allergic, don't eat anything containing peanuts. Earlier, however, you said that a major reason that PTSD persists is because people avoid reflection. Here we're saying you want to avoid thinking about the ringing in your ears if you have tinnitus,
That's right.
because that will amplify the circuits that underlie tinnitus. In some cases, you need to go into the event and work with somebody to, parse the event and uncouple the emotional load, such as treatment for PTSD. In other cases, focusing on the problem more and more becomes an issue. I guess there's probably also cases of PTSD where people are preoccupied by it. It's running like a script in the background.
That's right. Or it just pops up randomly. So for PTSD, cognitive behavioral therapists do 5 different things. Because people say, you're going to expose me to this? I'm going to get better? It doesn't make any sense. I'm already exposed to it. I think about it all the time.
How
But
does
they're
it
thinking about
not to
enough.
make
They're
sense?
thinking about it where they're losing control. So control, as you know from some classic neuroscience experiments, is really important. Getting shocked is not bad for you. It's getting shocked in an uncontrollable way where you're not in charge of it. If you can influence it, have some agency over it, then I can make a story about it. When I can reflect on it, I know, hey, bad things happen, but I have a role to play in it. When I'm living in an abusive home and just random stuff happens, there's no agency, there's no control. It's just random. That is what is most damaging to people and their neurons and their psyches. So here we're having a similar situation, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not tinnitus, right? They're totally different things. But there's a similarity, there's a commonality to them, that your thing that you think is making you better is making you worse. And there are many ways. We call this the prevent defense in football. I'm from Texas, so let's make a big change. We're ahead of the game. Let's change everything. Wait a minute. Bad idea. Let's just keep playing the game that was working. Oftentimes teams will lose because they'll change their strategy. Here, if you've got pain in your finger, we'll now switch to analogy to chronic pain. And we'll get back to your question about exactly how we're treating it, what the treatment is. If your finger hurts, you want to do something about it. Your mom taught you. Find things. Pay attention. Doctors tell you, pay attention. Let me know what the symptoms are. But sometimes that paying attention can become part of the cycle where you're feeding that.
Got it.
And that is then this positive feedback loop where it gets worse and worse and all the rest. And I'm not blaming people for paying attention to it. It is damn near impossible to not pay attention to pain. It's damn near impossible not to pay attention to ringing sounds. They don't all sound like sound. One woman told me she heard the sounds of a bird chirping in a cave. That's just a very specific thing that her brain is producing, the pattern of activity. And it's just super annoying. Who wouldn't be it? Easy to say, oh, just ignore it. I understand how hard that is because our attention goes to that. We need to make tools to help someone
But
like
this
that.
is surprising to me. If it's constant,
The commonality
you'll
is that
ignore
10
it.
20% of people are going to have tinnitus. Almost everyone.
10 to 20%. That's a huge
chronic
number
tinnitus.
of people.
It's a huge number. It's one of the most common. It's the
And that's
number
why I
one-
get so many questions about it.
Yeah.
And they're worrying about it and focusing on it is exacerbating it.
It's the number one military disability. So you get a 10% payment for the rest of your life. So it's $1 billion per year we pay for people with tinnitus. You can't measure it objectively, just like chronic pain. You can't see it. They don't want it. But you develop it if you're in a aircraft carrier launching planes, or you're blowing doors, if you're
Like headphones too loud.
playing headphones too loud. These things are really a problem. Those cells will get damaged. The brain doesn't know. If you're deaf in the natural world, you just die. We didn't evolve to get used to loud sounds. It didn't exist for thousands and thousands of years. That all came on with the Industrial Revolution. A thunderclap was like a loud sound. Nowadays, you can go to a concert and you'd be at 120 decibels, 130 decibels for hours at a time. Most people, interestingly, don't get tinnitus. We see the same thing in the rats. When we produce noise trauma, I can make everybody deaf. That's easy. But only half of them show signs of tinnitus. So the way the brain rewires itself depends upon the specifics of creating that positive feedback loop inside the brain. Similar things happen. Charlie Gilbert did these beautiful experiments with the retina. We make dual lesions in the retina, and all the neurons jump over some crazy place. We now have computational models where we understand the neurons have no inputs. They will tend to do dumb things. They don't tend to do smart things, because you didn't tend to have simultaneously paired retinal lesions. So trusting the network to do the right thing is a good idea. Brains are smart. But in the case of pathology, by definition, it's not doing the right thing, or it would have fixed it. So the same thing is happening with cancer. We get cancers all the time, but we fix them. What's unique about cancers that cause problems, the two-hit hypothesis, is multiple things have gone wrong. And the normal tools that eliminate cancer don't work. Same thing with epilepsy. Normally, you have a little epileptic circle, fire together, wire together, and then you go, oh, let's get rid of this one. We make little epileptic foci, get rid of them. We make little neuroses, we make little obsessive compulsives all the time. And then we eliminate them, right? Just like my daughter saying, I need to remove TikTok, or whatever it is. We find it to be a problem, we find a solution. Sometimes we're aware of it, make a conscious decision, but more often our neurons are just doing it, our cells are doing it on our behalf behind the scenes. When you have flagrant cancer that's going to kill the person, it's typically because multiple checkpoint inhibitors have been blocked. There's a lot of problems. We think the same thing is true of brain diseases, whether it's mental health problems or neurological.
Okay.
Two things must have gone wrong at least, not just one thing.
Perhaps this is one of the reasons why more and more we're hearing from people like Chris Palmer out of Harvard and others who are saying, nutrition and diet that supports metabolic health can help resolve, in some cases, all the symptoms, but in most cases, some of the symptoms of mental health issues, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, dementia, things of that sort. There was even an attempt to create a type 3 diabetes nomenclature for Alzheimer's. That didn't really stick because you can put people on a ketogenic diet. It doesn't always improve their Alzheimer's, and it certainly doesn't cure it. But the notion that you have multiple things going on to give rise to dementia, you have multiple things going on to give rise to any mental health disorder, and so pushing or pulling on a neuromodulator or changing your metabolic health in the way that neurons can use glucose or rely on ketones for fuel, it all kind of makes sense. Now that we understand and we're observing this more and more, where it gets tricky for me as a neuroscientist is the goal, the hope was always specificity.
Yeah.
Right? The hope was this. It was a little chip that you could put in that, okay, you have to spend the day at the clinic, but it's not 20 electric shock therapy treatments. Right. It's not a drug that makes your mood better, but makes you, kind of like raises your levels of apathy or nukes your libido or changes your appetite in a direction you didn't want. The hope was specificity, the kind of specificity that we're seeing with, I'm going to get some flack for this. I don't take these peptides, but I think a large number of people who could not lose weight any other way are seeing great success by taking Wegovy and Ozempic and related drugs. And I understand that they still have to exercise, and some people feel like it's cheating, and there's a bunch of issues related to insurance. But let's face it, sure there's some nausea, but people who for years and years just struggled with their weight are finally bringing their weight down into a healthier range, and hopefully they'll do the behavioral things that support them as well. So as neuroscientists, we always wanted specificity. So for someone with tinnitus who, is, okay, I'm gonna try not to think about it, but if I'm hearing birds in caves chirping in the background and I'm just trying to write or read, it's already hard enough to focus on doing, on focus and friction. So an impediment like tinnitus is something that one would hope you could just really just delete out like you put a line of script in a Word document. So when you stimulate the vagus nerve using this device, and you want to get rid of tinnitus, what are the patients doing? Are you capturing exactly what frequency the sound is?
Yeah, so we ask them what their frequency is. We do an audiogram, we can tell what their frequency, where they've lost are, but we don't know what their brain is required to play in their head.
But they're saying, wait, I hear it at that. It sounds like
You
you're
match
doing a
it to a
tone
tone.
matching.
Yeah, you do tone matching.
So you play like a low, medium, high tones, and then they go, wait, it's kind of
That's
like
the
the
one.
high tone, and then you dial it in.
You first have to teach them about octave confusion. If you're a music guy, you know I'm not a music guy.
I'm not a music
But
guy.
if you get the wrong octave, you can it's easy to confuse one octave higher, and we don't know what tone they're actually hearing. So it's a little bit to teach them about some tones sound the same, but they're just double the sound is the point. But once you can figure out what they're hearing, we then want all the other neurons to be important. So the idea we've talked about is that set of neurons is too important. It's doing something really important. Why? Because you're paying attention to it. Must be important. You keep paying attention to it. So I want to reward everybody but this set. So I play a low tone, lower than the thing, a high tone, higher than it. I'm trying to strengthen all the other neurons. Back in that science paper back in the day, by playing multiple different tones, it narrows receptive fields. So in this Nature paper from 2011, which we first treated tinnitus in animals, what we saw was most correlated was actually receptive field size. The neurons become non-selective, which means they now all respond to the same input. If you're really narrow, you only respond to one little bit of the cochlea. If you're broad, which happens after damage because you're trying to respond to something, now everybody responds to every wiggle and jiggle in the ear. All these neurons are now amplifying. Now the brain's a massive amplifier, and you get feedback. So what we're trying to do is narrow receptive fields and shift the map. Instead of having that big blue area where everyone's the same way, let's make diversity.
So you're trying to tune the piano and take out a few keys.
That's right. That's right. And this idea of diversity is something we didn't know about back in the day. The optimization, specificity idea. We had a culture of find the thing and get the thing. Now, mercifully, we're in a much more diverse idea. We're learning that the training set matters. The stimuli are likely to be more complicated. The idea that we wanted specificity, we wanted treatments, and neuroscience hasn't provided that. I'll take exception with that. With phenylketonuria, we have every baby born in this country gets a heel stick, and you measure the level of phenylalanine hydroxylase. And if they don't have it, we put them on a special diet. So they avoid phenylalanine, and they don't have severe mental retardation. Problem solved.
Right. This is the warning that many people have seen on their Diet Coke cans, but they really haven't explored as to what the meaning is. That PEA, right, is for us is harmless, maybe beneficial. Confession here: I take 500 milligrams of it every morning. Makes you feel pretty good. It's a little mild stimulant. I've been doing that for years. But if you don't have the enzyme to work with it, it can cause mental retardation.
Right. And before we just called everybody retarded, and now we go, wait, there's many different ways. And the fact we treated one, and it was a diet change, doesn't mean we cured all of them. There's many other things that cause severe problems. Fragile X syndrome, FMR1, different gene cause a different set of things, and you can't change your diet to fix it. That's not the nature of it.
Yep.
But the example we used from Human Weasel, where you now reverse suture, I've had lots of children just work with kids and point out to their parents, do you see his eyes don't go right? I never noticed. And an ophthalmology professor in neuroscience is going to think, doesn't everybody notice eye movements? No.
Yeah.
Some people just don't pay attention to that. You point it out, and they go get treatment, whatever it might be, and they're better.
Yeah, look, we should do a public health service announcement here since we're reaching some people. If your child, regardless of age, but if your child has a quote-unquote lazy eye or an eye that doesn't seem to align quite the same as the other, when they're fatigued or just naturally sits that way, it's very important to correct that early. Once you get out past a certain age, there are components of the brain that can become permanently blind to it, which doesn't mean they're going to lose more vision. It just means that they're probably only seeing correctly through one eye. So and it's normal for babies actually to the development of the ocular muscles of the eyes. They don't always track so well and fixate so well. Sometimes it's self-correcting, but they should really see a pediatric ophthalmologist. Sorry, I can't help myself.
No, absolutely.
Half of my appointment is in ophthalmology, so if I don't say this, my colleagues will be angry. But a lot of vision can be saved by simple patch, or as you put, like eye drop interventions that only have to be done early in development.
It's
Many friends
amazing.
whose kids have
It's amazing how few experiments were done. I mean, they didn't do thousands of animals. They did a handful. It's the smallest number. Had a very specific question, gave a very specific answer. So I do think the specificity has worked. On the molecular side, most people I mean, I'm not the one for saying this, many people, we look for psychiatric disorders to mostly be caused by a single solution. That's the smart thing to do. If it's something simple, like in your car, usually it's something simple. When your car is broken, there's usually one problem. But in an economic system, there's probably 50 problems. There's probably not one thing that's the bad thing. You gotta fix a lot of things. In an ecosystem, maybe somebody removed wolves and all you gotta do is put wolves back and it's an easy fix. But typically, it's some big, messy situation you're trying to better understand. And I think a biologist, we talked about that. I read a book not too long ago about kelp, sea kelp, macrocystis. And like, why does kelp live where it lives? It just includes hundreds of grazers, things adding to it. The story you've heard about sea urchins and otters is way too simple. But it's okay. It's a way to think about it. But we just come to understand to take care of the natural world, it's complicated. There's not going to be this one silver bullet. And that's the same with our brain. I like that. I'm fine with that. My health, my diet, my whatever. It's about diversity. Try to eat a bunch of things. If someone is just eating potatoes and tater tots and chicken nuggets, but that's all they eat, yes, you're going to need to supplement something. They're going to have problems. And a lot of people are, because their socioeconomic status is a big one that we don't talk too much about, like the neuroscience. They're trying to understand, if you're poor, what things are worth it and what things aren't. It's just really hard to make these judgments. Easy to be a parent when you've got lots of resources. Really hard when you're facing latchkey kids and expensive food and all the rest. So that specificity thing, I think we've nailed it on choline. I think we've nailed it on a lot of these stories. But does that mean we've got blanket cures for most neurological psychiatric disorders? No. For tinnitus, we understood, we had a theory of what it was. We ran animal studies, we reproduced it in animals, and then we cured it in animals. And then we did the next step. And it was not as successful as you wanted to. So the answer was 50% of people got 50% better.
Yep.
That is called 75% of the problem is still there, not very good. In addition, we had something called sequestration. The federal government shut down and large military travel got canceled. So we just had
recently.
That was years ago. Okay, it's a long time. So that, but there's just hiccups along the way, political, whatever else. But we were going to invest in it. It was the number one disability in the military, so we were going to invest in let's treat it. And then we got sidelined. Stroke had the advantage that unlike chronic pain and tinnitus, we know exactly what causes it. So my team switched to stroke because there's no controversy about stroke. No one's faking it. I can measure it very easily. I can see the hole in the head. I can see their functions. With tinnitus and chronic pain, you can't know. Spinal cord injury, same thing. You know what causes spinal cord injury. You had a fight, a car accident, or a fall, or a boating accident. For PTSD, it's the only mental illness we know what causes it. The diagnostic criterion A, trauma, is what causes you to have that thing by definition. The other is schizophrenia. We got theories, we got genes, we got factors. So we chose these first three very intentionally. And we're now sort of working our way back saying, if synaptic plasticity, rewiring of new connections in the brain, if that could be used therapeutically, we know it can. I mean, that's how rehab works. That's how people get better from drug addiction or cutting or whatever else they're doing. Someone talks to them. It's just kind of inefficient. Takes a lot of time, a lot of money. Can we help the therapist be better? Therapists love neuroplasticity. They haven't talked to therapists about neuroplasticity. They love them some neuroplasticity. But then they're disappointed because it's like, but I can't make everybody better. And I can't make anybody all the way better most of the time.
Yep.
So how can both be true? That's just how it is. It's a hard problem we didn't evolve with. We don't have a great solution, but we could do something about it. This was true of cancer 100 years ago. We would just say, Grandpa died of old age. We didn't know there were cells ravishing his body, prostate cancer, colon cancer, cervical cancer. We didn't know that. We just thought, he got bad, his heart stopped, he died. That's what happened. Now we took it apart, but it took decade after decade after decade. And we first thought there was one cell type. Now we know it's a whole living ecosystem of cancer cells, feeding each other and alive. You can't just attack it one way, you gotta attack it multiple ways. That's how I'm coming to understand these brain disorders. They're really tricky bastards. When you look at HIV, you go, oh, that's a good one. That's not just some virus. That's not just some bacteria with some polysaccharide you can attack. That thing is really, really tricky, which is why we don't have an easy cure for this communicable disease, which we totally understand. HIV, it's just a particularly sneaky one. But the specificity for all kinds of viruses, all kinds of bacteria, we have an amazing armamentarium. For the brain, we've got a couple. I would say Parkinson's disease, we know what causes it. And the symptom is you don't have enough output from your motor system, and so you could disinhibit the system with a deep brain stimulating nucleus. And people, everyone's seen the videos. If you haven't, go YouTube Parkinson's on and off deep brain stimulator, and you'll see people who are golfing and then can barely walk. Now, you and I know, as many people do, those final neurons will eventually die and there will eventually be a problem. You're not changing the death that's happening in a person with Parkinson's, but you're giving them years of new life. That's fantastic for relatively cost-effective tools. Cochlear implant, same thing. People are stone deaf. They're not lip reading. They can pick up a phone just like you and I and have a conversation. They are fully restored to normal hearing and conversation, but it's a small subset. The list of things we've cured is small, but those are proof of concepts that if we understand it, we can cure more. Not just alleviate, not just treat, but cure.
Well, I hear a couple of things, and I'm in agreement with you. First, everyone needs to appreciate that brains are made up of circuits and networks and chemicals, and it's very unlikely, except for rare case conditions, that there will be a one pill, one drug type solution.
Absolutely.
Or that there will be a 5-pill, 5-drug type solution to any neurologic or psychiatric illness. Sorry, folks, that's the reality. I think the last 50 years of research into these things has revealed that. I'm also hearing that direct circuit stimulation holds great promise. Your work, people with spinal cord injury, tinnitus, enhancement of learning in non-injured people, some of that work has been done, not as much for obvious reasons. Treating disease is kind of the priority. Brain stimulation and neural pathway stimulation from the brain to body, aka vagus stimulation, works. But it's not the whole picture. You also need very targeted training during the stimulation to know exactly what patterns of neural firing you're trying to notch out, as we say, and which ones you're trying to exacerbate to overtake the neural territory. And then the third category, which is drugs. Whether it's through a naturally occurring compound, like a mushroom that grows out of the ground, or synthetically derived psilocybin, or now a lot of the psychedelics, like LSD, they're trying to manufacture variations on them that don't carry the hallucinogenic properties, but perhaps can still work as plasticity agents. So there's all this is being worked on. But drugs, I mean, maybe better ways to augment serotonin that are neither psychedelic nor SSRIs. It seems like the tripartite approach is going to be best. It's going to be devices plus training plus drugs, so that someone can really boost the plasticity in the areas they want, and they can suppress neural circuit function in the areas they don't. And I think when we're talking about this, I think this is going to be in the context of stroke, spinal cord injury, dementia. Whenever you say autism, I always get a lot of comments saying, wait, why are we trying to cure autism? We're talking about people with such serious degrees so far on the spectrum that they need constant care from others. They're not functional.
Self-injurious.
It's self-injurious, yeah, this kind of thing. I'm not talking about people who are on the spectrum and functional. I know many people, I work with many people that are on the spectrum and functional. So, and on and on. So I think that if I were in charge, and I'm not in charge, but if I were controlling the NIH budget for neuroscience research, I would be encouraging all three of these areas, as well as trying to parse the various circuitries. I think it's all essential. I will say that I've been surprised how long it took for the adult plasticity work that you and Merzenich and Greg Reckenzone and others did to really make it into medicine. I feel like it took a while, not because you weren't busy working on it, but because it didn't seem like there was a big belief in brain-machine interface for a long time. Now we have Neuralink, we have you, we've got folks like our friend Eddie Chang, who's doing remarkable work in taking people out of locked-in syndrome. I think it's starting to happen. I'm very encouraged.
I have recently a new explanation that was frustrating to me, being raised by these fathers like we both were, who studied neuroplasticity and talked about it and trained about it. It was frustrating to me at first that people didn't get it. I've come around in my way of thinking about this. It was smarter to hope that it was going to be simple, that a stem cell could be added, that there was one cell type. That's actually not unreasonable. If your car is broken, hope it's something simple. Don't start off with a more complicated one. It's sort of Occam's razor at a societal level. The question is, how long do you keep doing it? And I think you're making this point. You got this one nice paper with adeno-associated virus, gene therapy, changing things. I mean, these are all on the table, all of them. Now, some of them are more safe than others, some are more challenging, but the combination therapy, we have a combination problem. It's a pretty big problem. whether it's obesity problem, neurodegenerative disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, anxiety disorders, mood disorders. But we don't need to medicalize everything. If you're fine, you're fine. But if you've got a serious problem, these are not subtle conditions. These are people who are really, really, really struggling. They're willing to try anything. And we have this obligation to sort out what works. And throwing the kitchen sink at it is not so great. The FDA is having to wrestle with what do you mean you do 4 different therapy? Let's just take a 2 combination therapy. Do I now have to do a 4-arm study where I do one group who gets both, one who gets just this, one who gets just that, and one who gets neither? Statistically, that really increases the cost. So we say, no, let's do it where you do all the things you think are going to need it, and then none of those things. So even, are we doing science experiments? No, we're trying to treat people. So I think the pieces of the puzzle are there, and to my mind, the animal literature is clear, it's complicated. I mean, I think about the number of genes that had, for ocular dominance plasticity, the change in the visual system with 2 eyes. How many genes play a role in that? Many genes. Many times someone said, here's a new gene that plays a role, there's a new gene that plays a role. It's complicated. We didn't know that. We really thought it was going to be grindstone isn't working because the water's not flowing in right during this thing. And when you're fixing a car, cars are complicated. Apologies to all my friends who are mechanics. But by comparison to the brain, where you're talking about 20,000 different genes, you're talking about billions of different inputs coming in every hour, and it's stored in a network of trillions of synapses. It's just really very complicated. We didn't have enough humility, but I now think even if we had the humility, it was still smart to spend 50 years trying what we tried. It just didn't work. And now the question is, what do we do next? And I think there will be investment. I think people who are enlightened, and it's interesting, patients really like the cochlear implant. They know how it works. It's not just take a pill. It's these, 8 or 20 electrodes are on my nerve, which is organized like piano keys, and each one pushes a different button. These are highs, these are lows. They kind of get it. They take ownership of it. And you see kids at the pool now, and they got bright pink ones. They're not bothered by it whatsoever. That's how I hear. And so I think that openness, the stigma's now gone. Before we had lots of stigma, and for me, the chemical imbalance thing creates a lot of stigma. You're broken. The only person who can fix you is someone who has the ability to prescribe medications. Doctors don't want that therapy. They're not looking to be the boss of the world. They're intimidated, bothered, humbled by it themselves. But that's the system that we were entertaining. Now that we have a situation where you're saying, you have a brain, I'm going to help you with it. Whether you're a coach, a parent, spiritual guidance person, a therapist, let's work to be who you want to be. I think that's just a much more healthy way. I think it's much more accurate. It's much more how economies, ecosystems work, these distributed complex networks. There's not usually one size fits all. And what's nice is our lived experiences really matter. What you think is working for you really is valuable. And we're all really different. The kinds of fiber supplements someone uses or the kind of sleep regimen someone else needs. I had someone who says that, God, she slept like 4 hours a night. And I was like, this is impossible. She made amazing things happen. I couldn't do it.
She's still alive.
She is. She's phenomenal.
Some people need a very little sleep.
It's amazing to
I
me.
know some of those.
That's
where they
a lot
get
of
right
it.
on it. I must ask because I can't help but ask. There are a bunch of domains.
If anything
where
is good
brain-machine
gene,
interface
not needing enough
is being
sleep,
talked about.
not
and used
needing average
not to
sleep
cure disease,
is
but to
the gene.
increase or accelerate plasticity. Some years ago, there was a device, and I'm not trying to pick on any companies here. I have no stake in this, but people were excited about it. It looked like a headband that you could put over your motor cortex or sensory cortex while you were practicing your golf swing or your baseball swing or studying. And the idea was that you were going to boost the levels of activity in the neurons sitting below that band, and the rationale was you're increasing the likelihood that those cells were going to fire together, wire together. I mean, crudely speaking, the logic was sort of there. There were a lot of pieces missing, like the critical spike timing dependent plasticity that you were talking about before. It's unclear if it impacted neuromodulation. I don't know whatever happened to those sorts of devices. It seems like it just kind of went the way of nobody uses them anymore. I certainly don't see people using them. Nowadays, there are a number of things. We get sent these from time to time. Where the idea is that you're going to get vagal stimulation with a cuff that either goes around your midsection, so these are non-invasive things, or an anklet tool that provides feedback by vibration. I've also recently seen a growing number of companies that are developing visors for enhancing sleep. There, I actually think there's an opportunity because some of them can engage eye movements. There's some very interesting literature about specific patterns of eye movements, making it easier to fall asleep very quickly. I'll get to this in a future podcast, but this is interesting. But what are your thoughts on non-invasive tools, commercial devices to boost plasticity? And I'm talking about in the absence of any pharmacology. Just put this thing over your head, put this helmet on, and we're not just going to measure brain activity, we're going to improve learning and memory.
Yeah, I mean, the key to the brain is information. The way ChatGPT got so smart is it knows every word we ever wrote to each other in every great book and all that. It just had a lot of information. And so the question is, what information is being added to the network? And so medications tend not to add a huge amount of information. They may bias, they may help, but experiences you have, when you learn to play violin, you did a lot of stuff. And that richness of information, which we, since the early days of information theory, Claude Shannon, we call it bits. How many bits of information is it providing? If something is always on, it can't be providing much information. So there was a big thing that was called transcortical transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS. There was transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. Each of these things had lots of great advantages. But the total amount of information they were providing to the neurons was relatively small compared to listening to my voice. My voice, if I write this down, you're going to see it's going to be megabytes. I record 20 minutes worth of me talking, it's going to take megabytes to write down all the vibrations if you want to hear my pitch intonation. If you just write down the letters, it could be much smaller, but there's still a lot of information. So I think that's the way I think about it, is how much information is being provided is the key unit. So if the thing is on all the time and not really feeding anything back, it's probably not helping much.
It's just like taking nicotine. It's just like taking some nicotine gum. It's raising acetylcholine that's increasing the amount of firing, but there's not enough specificity there in terms of timing. It sounds like it might slightly bias the probability that a learning event will occur, but maybe one of the reasons these devices, they keep surfacing, these commercial devices keep surfacing and then disappearing, is that no one is raving about the result.
That's right.
You would think if something was truly awesome, it would take off.
And that's why FDA decides not to regulate it. It's not dangerous. If you want to put a stimulator on that activates your stuff, you want to wear pressure point bands, you want to do copper, these things come, they go. That's totally fine. We don't. Just don't make medical claims. If you're making medical claims, that's crossing the line. We now have to switch gears and say we're going to have to come down like a ton of bricks on this. You haven't shown that. And so there have been claims about video games online, and companies have had to pay big fines because they made claims that this video game will fix whatever it is.
Stutter is a big one.
I have a friend down the street who's got a serious stutter problem. He's constantly asking, what can we do? We have a model, we think we understand, but everybody's different, right? People stutter for different reasons, different times. But clearly there's something in the brain. They'll tell you that. You ask them that. They don't think there's too much blood, too much bile, too much phlegm. That's not the problem. It's the wiring that's wrong. And I'm optimistic about that. That is something you do something about. But it is not going to be easy. So I would say look for things that are closed loop, that connect, that they're providing useful information, that have sensors. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I think that's the sort of easiest way to say it. Electrically activating your skin, providing extra feedback, having a bar. Let's just say you're trying to learn to drive a Standard and you have a tachometer. Of course it's going to be easier if you can hear the sound of the engine revving. That's more information. I know what I'm doing when it stalls. If I can give someone feedback, how fast was that ball spinning? I've got a friend who owns a golf shop, and I mean, it's incredible the tools they can give you of what your spin and slice is. That's really useful information. If it's providing useful information about what you're doing, that just tends to be helpful. If it's not, it can be greatly distracting. And there are certain circumstances where adding extra stimulations, extra sounds, extra buzzers, extra whatever, whether you're trying to do a running app or anything else, it can make you worse because you're now focused on the running app instead of on the let's just run. So I think people are trying to figure out when should we instrument it, when should we add this extra stuff, when do you need the boost and when do you not. And I'm frankly pretty impressed by the consumer. They tend to figure it out. They tend to be pretty skeptical, as they should be, and they tend to draw conclusions. If it's working among a lot of my friends, let's try it. And they're pretty smart too. There's no harm, why not try it? They can tell what's dangerous and what's not. If it hurts, I probably shouldn't do that. If it doesn't hurt, I'll try it for a while. But they tend to end up in the drawer. But even cochlear or hearing aids often end up in the drawer because they didn't get a really good one. So technology has to be really quite good to make it that level of making a clinically detectable difference.
Or habit forming or addictive.
Yeah.
Because in the case of nicotine, I see a lot of people who start with 1 3-milligram pouch or gum per day, and then pretty soon they're up to 6, and then they're half a canister. So sometimes in an attempt to get the boost in energy or focus or whatever, or neuroplasticity, people end up simply with a dependence on the tool, even if the tool didn't have much of an effect.
Yeah, we haven't talked about two things just from the evolutionary part. Why do we get used to everything? Why, if you take morphine, you just need more morphine? Why are we so good at that?
That is the problem.
We live in lots of environments where we're going to expose to a lot of things. Our biology seems to have made us really pretty tough. We live in all kinds of environments. People live in Greenland. They live on, I mean, it's amazing. It seems like in evolution, we were in lots of environments. And you might have been in an environment where the only thing you eat was poppy flowers. And so, okay, I'm always surprised how not bad these things are. I mean, we had the crack epidemic, and it was clear that all these babies were going to be just a bunch of wandering zombies. And then, you know, they were impacted, but not nearly as bad as the worst doomsday scenario. So I'm always telling parents, babies are tough.
Yep.
They're not as fragile as you might think. Things we do to ourselves, not as fragile. Because evolution has prepared us for all these pushes and pulls, which is a big shock. You don't want to get a bunch of traumatic brain injuries, but exposure to drugs, it's remarkable what we can tolerate and still be fine. There's an interesting idea that the psychologists first came up with, but we see this in neuroscience as well, the inverted U, where you got to get it just right, not too much. So more serotonin and norepinephrine enhances memories, but you give more, and now it degrades impairments. Why is that? I've got a pet theory, no evidence for this whatsoever, that because we sometimes take an agent, let's say eat some berries or something like that, that then send us over the moon, we have all these mechanisms that then shut down and say, here are conditions that we don't want to change. Because rewiring your brain is dangerous, right? You might live through the food poisoning, but you might now have a rewired brain that would be bad. So it seems like there's these mechanisms where you want to get, in our case, it's the alpha receptors, the norepinephrine, low affinity receptors, the ones that are easiest to activate are the alpha receptors. You want those, but you don't want the beta receptors. And they're not very different. There's this sweet spot, this Goldilocks zone, and the biology's always pushing us to be right in that. And everybody recognizes that. People who do meditation, mindfulness, they recognize this, trying to stay in this right sweet spot, which is back to that optimization we've talked a lot about. Why is that? That's how you're trying to figure out which is the most important thing, not the max thing. That might be something that's just pathological and weird. Not the minimum thing, that's something you can just ignore. But this narrow range of things you're trying to pick out. It's like shopping. You don't want to buy all the things in the grocery store. I'm only looking for certain things.
Well, this is essentially, if we're talking about psychedelics, I mean, you look at the counterculture of the 60s, and, you know, I grew up hearing stories. I was born in 75. I heard stories about, you know, people who took LSD and stared at the sun and, you know, burnt their retinas out. And I don't know if those stories are true or not. There's a lot of fear-based messaging.
Yep.
On the other hand, there were a number of people who took too many drugs. And there were probably a number of people who should have taken more psychedelics. Like, you can argue it both ways. And I feel like now that we're sort of returning to this notion that plant-based compounds, in particular psilocybin, MDMA, MDMA is synthesized, it's not plant-based, could potentially be valuable therapeutics for psychiatry. The idea is not to give people just as much as they want or to give them experiences. The idea is that it's very targeted, it's dosage targeted, it's therapeutically targeted, and so that getting at that sweet spot. I feel like what I keep hearing from you today is that, you know, there have been enough. By the way, I love your optimism. You're optimistic even about the mistakes we've made in the past, that they've led us to this place now. That
Obviously.
we need to embrace the complexity. But the tools remain, in my mind, the same. You've got, in no particular order, you've got devices to measure and devices to alter neural circuits in the brain and body. You've got pharmacology, drive certain chemicals up and certain chemicals down. And you've got talking and thinking,
Yep.
reflecting. I mean, that's basically what we've got. That's the kit. And I can't imagine a world where there's an additional tool.
I would just mention gene therapy. I worked on genes and moved them around a long time ago. My mom asked me, are you sure we want that gene moved there? Luckily, I found out genes move all the time anyway. That's not something we're doing that's special. But whether it's Duchenne's muscular dystrophy or Alzheimer's, if we have to do that, we'll do it. I mean, if someone is going to lose all their memories, putting in a virus that's been genetically engineered, if that stops me from losing all my memories and being a burden on society and my wife, I'll do that in a heartbeat. So the toolbox we've created is just so rich. I mean, we've got these places like Genelia Farms. They're just making up new things. I mean, it's just such a Star Trek world where you can't wait a week and someone had invented some new thing. But how to use them all together? That's the problem. You go look at a mechanics shop, they don't have 5 tools. They have 500 drawers. I got a friend. There's so many drawers. I can't even pull open all the drawers to look. He's just fixing one car. How do they have 500 tools? And we're thinking we're going to need 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So I think you're right. Putting the right combinations, having that reflection, having that societal support, knowing when am I going to go into this, helping people make those decisions. It's complicated and hard. We're getting better and better at it. I really think we are. Kids got a dog phobia. Someone says, here's what we should do. First, blind away, never show them the dog again. Okay, we tried that, it didn't work. And now your peer group's going to start telling you, if you hide from it, that's not going to get better from it. Whether it's abstinence, right? We had this, people in a lot of pain. People didn't think that was a good idea. Doctors, CCSF, and other places didn't think it was a good idea. People were in pain, so they medicated them. No one knew there would be unintended consequences. Certainly some people did, and there's lawsuits and jail time and all the rest for a few people, but most people are just doing the right thing. In Catholic school, I also learned that road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yep.
We had to own that, right? Thalidomide was a drug. We were going to prevent women from having, nausea during first trimester. We didn't know it was going to cause birth defects.
Yep.
But we learned that lesson. We processed it. We took the humility from that. You can't just take the easy way out. The fact that it helps today doesn't mean you aren't going to later look back and regret it. And so we don't make change fast in our society. Democracies don't make change fast. They always built-in ways to change slow. So we've got time to make sure it works. And I think it's frustrating to a lot of people who say, my son went to war and needs a treatment, give him what they need now. And there's all these people saying, hey, let's hold on, let's wait and see. I'm comfortable with that. That we're waiting, taking our time. The process takes slow. It's frustrating to me, I'll be honest, how slow it is to do clinical trials. We're running a lot of trials, a lot of people I know with a lot of serious injuries, and I can't move to the next thing because the work on this one is so slow. But better to be too slow than to take this lightly and think we're just going to do all these things, changing people's brains. And this is literally who they are. This is where their personality resides. This is their experiences. So I've been very pleased that the federal government's doing a great job of just saying, let's try all the things. Like you said, they're not against gene therapy. They're not against pharma, big pharma. They're not in big pharma's pocket. They're just saying, look, what's going to work? We'll know when it works. We'll all know when it works. And for the things that it has worked, phenylketonuria, cochlear implants, I paid a ton of money on cochlear implants. You just do the next thing, and now there's multiple companies that sell those, and you can have that. They tried that for the retina, and so far, correct me if I'm wrong, they're still not an awesome. One of my first students is at Henry Ford working on the retinal prosthesis. It's still hard.
Yeah, they'll get there. DJ Chichelniski, Dan Planker, there are other people working on this. Neuralink's working on it as well.
Yep.
Artificial retina, or maybe bypassing the retina and quote unquote curing blindness. It's going to happen.
Because you know what you need. It's hard. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we give up. People are blind.
You know what inputs you need. You know what's needed in the brain. I think also I'm encouraged by the fact that some of the smartest people in neuroscience and engineering are working on it. Certainly at Neuralink, but also in academia. These are some of the best minds on the planet. These are really like the astronauts of science and in lots of fields, but certainly in visual restoration.
And the miniaturization, the wireless coding, all the problems that we had back in the day, they're sort of just evaporated. The chips get smaller and smaller, the power is better and better. So I too am optimistic. If you were blind today, you'd wish it was ready yesterday. Sure, but it's going to take investment, and it's a hard problem. We don't know how long it's going to take, whether it's Alzheimer's or schizophrenia. We just keep investing, and our country keeps giving it to the entire world for free. We sequence the entire genome. We just gave it away. Who does that? That's just what we do. So I think that kind of thing, when I see something like that, we can monetize it, we can patent it, we can say you can't use that gene, I invented that gene. I said, no, we're not going to do it that way. So I just think we've learned some good lessons about how to just innovate and share. Other countries are learning. Let's do it together. It's way better together than alone. So I'm optimistic this brings us together. I'm optimistic the problems are not unsolvable. And once we understand that they're synapses, right, they're just connections, and that those things evolve to change. We're not making them change. I'm not Frankensteining it. I'm not hacking it. That's how it was built to do. If we need gene therapy, drugs, devices, counseling, therapy, if we need 5 or 10 things, that's how my normal life was. My childhood was a lot like a lot of factors. Diet, nutrition, exercise, all those things were shaping who I am. And we hoped it was simple. It wasn't simple. Would have been nice. And a few things were. But the vast majority now are complicated, and it seems like that humility and that working with patients and letting them understand what are they doing. No one is trying to control anyone's brain. No one is trying to put in chips and make you do things you don't want to do. That is not the future of this. This is not that scary thing. Find serious problems and see if we can help.
Well, I love your optimism, and I'm encouraged by what you've done already. And I should have known that if I sat down with the author of one of my favorite papers in science, one of my top 10, maybe even my top 5, that it would be a discussion of the sort we just had. I've learned a ton from you. I went into this knowing a thing or two about plasticity, some training there, indeed, but I learned so much, and I'm thinking about it completely differently now, to be honest. This notion of needing focus and friction, the reflection piece, that what mental rehearsal will and won't do, the value of a small device like this for patients that are struggling with any number of different conditions, when paired with the appropriate training and rewiring stimuli. You've also reframed the way I think about drugs that can modify neuromodulators like nicotine. And of course, everyone should make a choice that's best for them. But I could go on and on. But I think it's evident to anyone that's listened to this conversation now that you're really out there to help us and to build things that are going to help humanity, and you're doing that. I'm very excited about the recent paper getting paralyzed people to access more movement. Once again, I'll provide links to those and other resources in the show note captions. I know you have some open clinical trials as well. Maybe we can direct people to the possibility that they could be subjects if that's appropriate. I want to thank you for the work that you've done, that you're doing, and that you continue to do, and for coming here today and to contribute to public science education. It's been wonderful for me, and I know for everyone listening, so thank you ever so much.
Thanks for helping get this complicated information out to people. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Michael Kilgard. To learn more about his work, please see the links in the show note captions.